Hey everybody, and welcome to another Monday night live stream reading. Tonight I'm going to be reading from Walter Wangerin Jr.'s masterful storytelling novel, The Crying for a Vision. This book is not nearly well known enough, I think, for the quality that it is. I like using it in teaching, in part because there are so many great things going on in this story that are teachable. Walter Wangerin Jr. actually won the National Book Award for a different novel you may have heard of. It's called The Book of the Dun Cow. I use that one to teach a lot too, but this one just has a flavor to it. It has a voice that's fascinating. I'm not going to read the back cover copy because the back cover copy on this is a first edition copy. I didn't know this book existed, but I found it like 20 years ago at a library sale that I think it was $1, and I saw his name on the back, and I was like, wait a minute, I really like this guy's work. I'd never heard of this book. So I bought it and loved it. And yeah, when they did the first edition copy, I guess they had not secured, I don't know, quotes or something for it. So they just pulled a piece of the story and printed it on the back, and I'm not going to give away that part of it. Tonight I'm actually going to read, the first two chapters, but I'm also going to read a couple of notes that appear in the beginning before the book starts because they're kind of necessary. The book is about a Lakota boy named Waskin, which means moves walking. And Walter Wangerin Jr. was not Native American, but he did spend some time with the Lakota people, and he talks about that a little bit in his introduction. So I'm going to read from the first 20 pages or so, and then I'll make a few comments and see if you can, if you agree with my assessment of this book. So this is The Crying for a Vision by Walter Wangerin Jr. A dedication and thanksgiving to the Lakota people. A Lakota may refer to himself as Ike Wakasha, a man, a human, the basic two-legged thing, a plain person. Or else, speaking of his whole nation, he might say Oyate Ike, meaning the real people, that first wild native race which stands between sky and earth, linking the two, the Indians. In consequence, all other races are Oyate Unma, the other people, grouped by the single fact that they are not Lakota. So there is pride in the title. Oyate Ike, the Lakota, are Ankatu, distinct, superior, representing the purest of humankind. But by a paradox, there is also a universal commonality here. For if they are the people, the thing itself, then fundamental humanity is represented in them as well, and in them, therefore, may any people see itself. In them, in the clean, uncomplicated knowledge which the Lakota achieved concerning themselves and their relationship to the whole created world. In them, not only in their culture, which through many generations learned the plains and loved the buffalo and lived in union with nature red and blue, not only in their history, which sent them west before there were ponies, then gave them ponies and therewith swiftness and distance and glory, not only in their external behavior, codes, relationships, modesty, morals, courage, and virtue, but also in their vision, in their spirit. Their stories, their legends, may in other people find itself reflected, in the rituals with which they give eternal expression to an inner awareness, in the ceremonies by which the Lakota have passed wisdom from generation to generation. This people has named and known itself, a shining self-awareness, a public giveaway, for in them knowledge becomes a song, and songs are sung, and anyone can listen, and someone might learn. By a gracious invitation, I experienced several sun dances near Rosebud, South Dakota. There was peace in that place and genuine friendship. Lakota. The welcome with which non-Indians were received is largely due to a man named Elmer Running. He is the Wakasha Wakan who leads this sun dance. Years ago, he saw in a vision all races and all peoples dancing in the same sacred circle. With great courage, he acted upon his vision. The private conviction became a public gift, and thus the Oyate Ike have invited Oyate Unma into relationship. It has not been easy. Such changes are never easy, but Elmer Running is a brave man and a prophet. To him and to his people my story is dedicated. But that which is to them is also of them. For although it is a fiction, I've woven Indian legends into my tale, sometimes whole, sometimes just the threads, taking the tone and the vision of a legend, but making the narrative new. For I spent many years studying this culture at its strongest, proudest period, when it was still untroubled by the intrusions of the Washikus, and have sought to commemorate that glory by reproducing its history and tradition as accurately as possible. For my story presents the Lakota as Oyate Ike indeed, that common people in whom all peoples might see themselves. Therefore good and evil mix in them just as virtue and vice exist together in any one family or nation on earth. For I have found in the Lakota vision a rich analogue for the relationship any people of genuine faith experiences with creation and the Creator. It was my fortune then, and my artistic choice, to use their world as the controlling metaphor of this novel. Reader, watchin Sapa yo, look not at the tale, but through it for the truth. Finally, I must speak a personal word of thanks to Marlene, White Rabbit, Helgamo, who made my time on the Rosebud both possible and bountiful. Pila Mia, Walter Wangerin Jr. And I should apologize before I continue for any of my bad renderings of these Lakota words. If you're out there listening to this and wincing when I read them, you have my sincere apology. Okay, now there's another note called Before the Story, Awaniyetu Tayawapi of Slow Buffalo's Band. On the skin of a buffalo, the painter has painted a picture for each year of Slow Buffalo's band. These pictures are a winter count. They tell the long story of this band of Lakota. Look carefully. Over the years, the lives of the people changed twice, violently, once for glory and once for sorrow. First, for many years, the times were calm and very good. There was peace. The band was small, but it was not hungry. See, the painter has painted buffalo for those years in order to signify that there was food enough and contentment as well, and friendship with the four-leggeds. All was well. These were the red and blue days, truly. But then the painter begins to add numbers to the band, both of people and of ponies and of teepees, because the band grew suddenly in size and in glory. Here is a face painted black. Here are the jagged lines of lightning on a man's leg. This one band now led many, many warriors into battles greater than anyone could remember. Even the painter of their winter history does not know how to signify the enormity of this war. He draws a sun with bites taken out of it, as if the daytime sun, like the nighttime moon, could be eaten. Finally, the painter must draw famine. Immediately after the war comes hunger. This is the year of the scaffolds. Because so many people died, so many were buried. Do you see that the ponies and the dogs are all painted as bones here? That is because the people ate them. And there are no buffaloes in these pictures. There are no four-leggeds at all, nor winged creatures either. This is the year of great loneliness, when all the animals went away, and the people were so sad that they ceased to sing. The last picture on the winter count shows a boy with black hair and black eyes. There's a man standing on the boy's chest and raising an axe to kill him. But the painter has painted this boy as big as a mountain. Part 1. 1. Moves walking. Now then, the story starts here with a small question. Why was a 5-year-old child sitting in the teepee of the chief, a little boy cross-legged and scowling as fierce as the rabbit? What could have been the reason for the boy's elevation? Well, if he were one filled with ability, this was an honor. If he'd been bad, of course, this was discipline. But the boy showed nothing remarkably good or bad about himself. Skinny body, long glossy hair, the shoulder bones popping through his skin, kneecaps like cracked firewood. He was staring at the chief and trying hard to frown as gravely as that old man, who himself sat cross-legged toward the doorway. The chief owned a heavy hanging face, an enormous nose, a great drum of a belly. The boy kept scowling, puffing his cheeks and sticking out his bottom lip. It wasn't working. He might have been able to scribble a little wrath onto his brow, but not into his black eyes. Bright, rising suns were the black eyes of this child, eyes that followed all he saw as persistently as the mosquito, probing the motion of his elders. Hungry eyes, but it must be said on his behalf that he scarcely noticed how angry his gaze could make his elders. "Moves walking," they would shout at him. "Stop that! Don't stare like that! Honor those older than you! Stop that! Stop that, you Wablanika, or I will hit you with a stick!" No, with eyes as large as lakes, the child could not look grim, nor could he make his belly big. Why then, on this particular day in the moon of the grass appearing, April, did Moves Walking, a boy but 5 years old, whose Lakota name was Waskin occupy a position of some importance within the band, sitting in Slow Buffalo's personal teepee on the left side of the doorway, so that he was almost opposite of the great Itankan himself. Not for honor, not for punishment either, but because his grandmother was also there, sitting on the other side of the door. There were 3 in the teepee. She was the third, a tiny woman as small and dark and wrinkled as an old potato, reaching forward to rub her feet and shaking her head. The Itankan, too, was shaking his head because they were in the middle of a conversation about youth. These 2 people were very old, with many memories between them, and only one friend fully trustworthy, only one friend fully understanding, and that friend, for each, was the other. Moves Walking was in the chief's teepee because he had no choice. He had to stay by his grandmother, and she was here because the old man had asked her to come, and he had asked because on this particular day the rest of the village was crazy with celebration, and the chief was not pleased. He wanted company in his gloom. Outside the teepee, people were running and screaming and laughing. Inside the teepee, a small boy felt neglected. The sticking out of his bottom lip was a genuine effort at pouting. He didn't want to look grim like the chief. He wanted to look grimly at the chief. Outside the teepee, little children were squealing so loudly they frightened themselves. Young men were whipping up their ponies and thundering down the village rows, wheeling their mounts into dangerous turns, showing off. Women of every age were making the tremolo of encouragement as if the men were engaged in battles and winning. But the Itankan sat in his teepee and gazed at the wrinkled old woman and heaved a heavy sigh. So did the small boy sigh. No one noticed. Waskin was required to stay by his grandmother because she was, so far as anyone could tell, his only living relative. From the beginning, no one knew who his father was. His mother had never named a man, and then, while the boy was still in a cradleboard, she too had disappeared, so the people of the village began to call him Wablanika, orphan. Little boy, little grandmother. She sat on the right side of the doorway, her legs straight out in front of her, seeming as small as he who sat on the left. But there were differences. The boy's eyes were huge and his skin was smooth. Her eyes were tiny and bright and pressed into a badlands of a face. Little grandmother, for her the years had been torrents and terrible droughts, creating deep gullies across her face. But her eyes were clean. Her eyes were hazel bright and clean. Shrewdly now she watched Slow Buffalo heave his sigh. She said, "Tatanka, honkeshne, what is the matter with you?" All at once the village fell quiet. The silence outside was like a pressure, people holding their breath and waiting. Inside, the boy's black eyes were nearly popping from his head because he knew who was coming. He knew the hero was almost here, and he couldn't stand it. Then someone shouted, "Hey, hey!" Waskin clapped a hand over his mouth. Then 100 people were shouting greetings and bellowing praises. "Hey, hey, hey, hey!" The whole village exploded in a sustained thunder. The boy put 2 hands over his mouth. Poor Waskin felt yells in his throat, too. The hunter was home. At this very moment, the warrior of glory was riding toward their teepees. Waskin eyebrows rose in speechless appeal. His nostrils flared, his small chest panted, but no one was paying attention, and he didn't yell. Oh, listen! There were the hoofbeats of one walking pony. Even beneath the roar of the people, the boy could feel those hoofbeats in the earth. Fire, thunder. That mighty hunter, that dreadful warrior, was right now passing outside the skins of the chief's teepee. How could a boy not yell? How could a boy not die? Then many, many ponies were passing by, and both of the ancient people with him bowed their heads. The Atankan closed his eyes in a seeming weariness, but the old woman was counting. 2 and 5 and 10 and 20, and by the sound of their step they were loaded down with buffalo meat. 40 ponies, 50 ponies. Tatanka unkeshne, the old woman said the name of her friend. Did you count what just came home? 50. The first hunt of the season and the first pony raid. Both, and this young fellow all by himself brings back enough food to satisfy 3 villages. Aren't you glad? Doesn't this cause some pride in the heart of an Intankan? Already the sounds outside were subsiding from roars to the rhythms of work. Meat-drying racks were dragged into place. Great strips of buffalo meat were being cut to hang there, later to be pounded with whole cherries and bone tallow into a good, nutritious food called wasna. The sounds of village at work now grew soft and continuous like the ticking of 10,000 ants. People were lashing willow frames together, upon which they would stretch new buffalo hides. They were sharpening fresh tools for scraping the skins clean. They were building high fires and filling buffalo paunches with water. The fires to heat stones, with which they would drop in the water to make it boil, to render fat from the bones for wasna. Hey, happy day, good and happy work. A winter of hunger was ended. Richness had returned. But Slow Buffalo the chief kept his great head bowed, his old eyes closed. Tatanka unkeshne, the old woman said. What is the matter with you? He made a deep sound in the cave of his nose. She said, Listen, Wachachala. Critical people might think that an old hunter is jealous of a young one, yes? I am not such a person myself, of course, but gossips might say an old warrior begrudges a young one his glory. Slow Buffalo's big belly began to jump upward. Waskenmani thought these were spasms, but then the man's shoulders started to shake, and a rumbling rolled from his nose. He was laughing. He raised his head and said, Old woman, I broke a tooth on some wasna today. He grinned. Lo, there was a whole new gap in his smile. You and your feet, me and my teeth. Woman, we are coming to pieces. Ho, ho, ho. Waskenmani's grandmother also began to giggle. It was clear that these two were enjoying a joke together, though the boy had no idea what was funny about crumbling teeth and crooked feet. He stuck out his bottom lip so far he could see it. Here was the chief of the entire band displaying his gums while the rest of the people were busy working. Why should a child have to sit for this? His grandmother said, So then, that is your trouble. You won't be able to feast on new meat tonight. Ho, ho. At that very instant there came a scratching on the door flap. Someone was asking to come in, a giant, according to the tremendous shadow he cast on the yellow buffalo skins. Immediately the mood inside the teepee changed. Laughter died on the chief's lips. His face fell, his eyes snapped upward, and the old woman squinted at her friend. So, this is your trouble? She whispered. Not his success, Slow Buffalo said, but his manner. There is something here that scares me concerning our future. All at once he raised his voice and shouted, How? The mood of the boy, too, had changed. No bottom lip, no pouting now. His face flamed with anticipation. He had covered his mouth with both hands again because happiness was booming in his chest. How? Shouted the chief. Come. So the flap was drawn back. So sunlight flooded the teepee, blinding the boy, and into that sunlight, bowed low by his entering, stepped a man. Fire Thunder. Oh, what a man now unfolded beside small Waskenmani. As for height, more glorious than the thundercloud, a man like a single cottonwood standing alone mid-field, tall and tough. As for strength, muscled and mighty and shining, his head ascending to the smoke hole, his shoulders a shelf of the heavens. Behold how his frame filled the teepee, cords of power down his arms, a brace of muscle at the forearms. Waskenmani could reach and touch the back of the huge left hand, but he didn't dare. He wasn't even breathing. Here was a warrior, oh. Here was a hunter in naught but a loincloth, a knife at his hip, braids on his broad back, and, slanting down his forehead and cheek in order to cover the left eye forever, an otterskin headband. Whoever had seen beneath that slash of a headband? Who knew what was hidden there? The right eye flashed like black obsidian. The left remained as mysterious as God. And the jaw of Fire Thunder was so absolute that young men whispered, Inyan, stone. This jaw was of stone, and perhaps the left eye was an eagle's beak. "He fights in silence," the young men said. "He fights in solitude. He never cries out, and even when he is done, he does not utter stories. Others must sing his glories for him." In his right hand now the warrior hunter carried a parfleche bag. Fire Thunder had come to the chief's teepee in order to observe a ritual, bringing first meats as a gift. Slow Buffalo said nothing. Waskenmani squirmed in discomfort. Someone should speak to such a hero, welcome him, acknowledge him. But Fire Thunder seemed equal to any situation. With an outrageous grace, he sank to one knee and placed the parfleche bag on the ground before him. In a voice as smooth as the owl's flight, he murmured, "Liver and kidney, grandfather, soft meat. I would not want the mighty Itankan to abuse his poor old teeth with chewing." Slow Buffalo's eyes flashed. His face drooped like a sliding mud, but still he said nothing. "I rode west," the hunter continued, "west past the mountains, and yet farther west than Lakota have courage to go, and I drove the buffalo herds back." Waskenmani gasped. He couldn't help himself. The reference to such distances set him buzzing with a question which came often into his mind, a question of such urgency that even the awe of this moment could not restrain him. Surely, if anyone, Great Fire Thunder, would know the answer, surely he. So the child went up on his knees beside the warrior and spoke out loud. "Ate?" he said. "Father?" he said, a term of extreme respect. Immediately his grandmother slapped her thigh for silence, and the chief frowned, and Fire Thunder whirled around on one knee. The covering of his left eye had hidden the boy till now. "Ate?" the child repeated in spite of all, but the giant's reaction was so strange that Waskenmani, seeing it, didn't speak again. Fire Thunder first had narrowed his eye at the 5-year-old, but now he opened it in seeming recognition, and his face began to swell with emotion. His visible eye ignited white fire, his brow grew black, but he lifted his right hand and pointed at the boy as if to say, "Don't speak to me, boy." In fact, the man said nothing at all, but a hissing escaped his teeth. Without a word, without asking leave of the Atonkan, without prayer or approval or an end to the ritual, the warrior stood, bent down, and departed the tepee. He went forth like an owl, in perfect silence. For a while that silence continued within the tepee. Then Move's Walking whispered, "Unchi? Grandmother? But I have to ask if he met my mother in the faraway." Slow Buffalo's great cheeks were trembling. "Did you hear that?" he said. "Woman, did you see what he did? He mocked my age. He scorned me with his joke. Liver and kidney, old teeth and chewing. No, I do not like him. No, I do not trust this Fire Thunder." That's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to take a quick drink here, and then I'll read chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called Fire Thunder. On the days when a hunt is successful and the village has plenty of meat to prepare, children are granted unusual liberties. No one is supposed to get angry. Rather, everyone should be so full of gladness and thanksgiving that they laugh at little irritations. So tiny warrior boys make raids on the meat that hangs from new drying racks, then gallop away and gorge themselves. With small arrows, small boys shoot holes in water bladders. The women have to return to the streams with new bladders, but they smile. Everyone is happy. As Wakantanka has been good to the people, so the people must tolerate tiny fools. The boys sneak up behind an honorable old man, then stick his skin with the point of speargrass. If he jumps, the village roars with laughter. If he yells at the children, people point. These are the good red and blue days, gifts from God. On exactly such a day, in the moon of the grass appearing, Waskenmani, 5 years old, decided to take advantage of his brief liberty. He planned to approach the one-eyed hunter, the far traveler, Great Fire Thunder himself, even in the midst of their nighttime feasting, and to ask whether the man had seen his mother anywhere west of the mountains, and if so, where, and how could a boy get there? Come evening, all the advisers of the village ate their gifts of new meat first. The rest of the people waited at their teepees, anointing themselves and chatting with excitement. It was going to be a wonderful feast, dancing and stories. Never before had so many buffaloes come at the hand of one man. Then the boy heard the crier call from the council teepee in the middle of the village, "All come home." He yelled in his high voice. This was a very skinny old man with the bones and joints of a skeleton and a terrible cough. "Come home! Ha! Ha! It is more than I can eat!" That was the signal for everyone to gather. The people began to stream toward the center. The children ran. The sky was a dying vermilion. Great fires gave good light, and the faces of the people were dancing already with gladness and the leaping flames. Waskenmani, too, ran forward, pulling his grandmother behind him, but she had bad feet and walked slowly. "Unchi, hurry, hurry!" He felt so happy to be in the center of all these circles, the fires first, then the people whose sweat scent and sage gave him comfort, and whose laughter he loved with his whole heart. Next the circle of teepees like silent guards around them, then trees of the forest, murmuring, nodding at the tops of them, and then forever and ever the plains. The earth, the sky, all. "Oh, Unchi, there are so many laughs in my chest right now." When they arrived at the fires, the old woman sat down and began to rub her feet. Her grandson peered around the people. Even as young as he was, he knew where to find the hunter, reclining back in shadow. This was his custom, to stay at the edges of circles. He wore no adornment. He never put himself forward. He never had to. There were scores of young men willing to sing his praises and to tell the tales of this particular hero. In fact, it was because of Fire Thunder's reputation that the village had swollen in size lately. So many young men coming to join the hunts and the raids of this one, though he gave them no encouragement, and seldom even spoke to them. Emotionless, cold, solitary eyes, even in a crowd, Fire Thunder lived at the edge of circles. Now he lay by the council teepee, picking grass. The little boy moved toward this giant in stages, a few hops at a time. It required much boldness, more surely than this afternoon when he blurted his words without thinking, because to think first causes nervousness. So he sat for a while on the far side of the fires, thinking. Then he crept round near the storytellers and squatted there and listened to them, thinking. The storytellers said, "We saw it with our own eyes. We promise. It is true." All of the people near Waskenmani strained to see with the eyes of their hearts. On account of the mightiness of Fire Thunder, no one had questioned whether it was true. They believed the story even before it was told. They only wished to see it. The storytellers crouched in front of the flames. "We saw him ride his pony into a herd of stampeding buffalo," they whispered. "We saw him ride his pony into a herd of stampeding buffalo," they whispered. "Straight to the middle of the herd, shooting and shooting, Tatanka down. And he never cried, yoo-hoo," they whispered. "Now listen. Here is the story we have to tell. One bull at the head of the herd knew where the hunter was behind him. Suddenly, that bull drove his hooves into the earth and wheeled around and bellowed and split the stampede into two by standing still, scraping the ground. He was Tatanka, very big and very mad. Then he lowered his horns and he charged back through the herd right for the hunter, and many buffaloes began to turn and run with him until it was like a flood rushing in upon itself. But Fire Thunder never swerved. Fire Thunder only whipped his pony the harder, galloping toward the buffalo bull, notching an arrow, taking aim with two arms and shooting Tatanka in the neck just below his hump. But that old bull was so mad that nothing could slow him. He kept coming, and Fire Thunder kept coming, and when they came together, the buffalo drove his right horn... Dramatic pause. Drove his right horn into the pony's chest and ripped it open so that all the ribs were split and stuck out. The pony pulled up with his eyes wide open, and then he went down in dust, but the hunter did not. "No! Listen!" shouted the storytellers. "Listen! Fire Thunder sprang from the back of the dying pony to the back of a passing buffalo. He landed facing the tail. He grabbed that tail and twisted it, and made his buffalo go wherever he wanted to go. Well, Fire Thunder followed the bull that had come back looking for him, and he caught up to him, and he ran beside him a while going backwards, and then he shot Tatanka so hard that the arrow passed through his heart and out the other side, and we saw this story from the beginning to the end, and it is true, yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo." The whole village cried out, "Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo!" Such pride in their voices, such joy in their eyes. Waskenmani, too, felt his face grinning because of this story, and he squealed yoo-hoo with all the Lakota. But then he forced himself to hush. He had a plan. He had a question to ask. On hands and knees he crept past the legs of those now rising to dance, past the drum and the drummers who sang with their heads thrown back to the black skies and their mouths wide open. Great flames made even the teepees seem to dance. There was Fire Thunder, over there, lying on his left side and leaning his head on the flat of his hand. He seemed not to have heard his own story. He was gazing at the tip of his knife, now balanced on his right forefinger. He was chewing something. As he chewed, the muscle in his jaw clenched and hardened. The 5-year-old boy gathered his last piece of courage and crawled toward the top of the head of the reclining giant. It felt to him as if they were in a bubble together. No one else, no sound else. His heart bucked with its question because, for the first time, he believed there was the real chance of an answer. This was the thing the boy thought about more than any other thing. Where had his mother gone? She had loved him. She had said so. She had wept over him and made him promise to obey his grandmother. He still remembered his mother's exact words and the sound of her voice, and he had promised, and then she had turned and run west into the night and had never come back again. So the boy whispered now, "Ate?" His voice was very soft. Perhaps the drumming and the singing drowned it out. Perhaps the giant hadn't heard. "Father?" Did the hunter stiffen then? Did his good eyes squint and fix on some point past his knife? Waskenmani could not be sure. He raised his voice and said, "Father, did you see my mother in the west?" He went up on his knees and said, "Do you know where she is? Can you teach me how to get there?" The boy was looking down upon the tremendous head of the warrior like a puppy preparing to lick its master's ear. "Father?" Fire Thunder seemed not even to breathe. His eyelid drooped as if with sleep, but the muscle in his jaw was pulsing with a steady power. Waskenmani reached his pointer finger to that motion and said, "Her name is Rattling Hail Woman, Wasu Snawin." In the instant he uttered her name, his finger touched Fire Thunder's jaw, and the giant erupted. He roared. He rose from the ground with so horrible a roar that the drumbeat froze on the air and the dancing stopped, and the whole village turned to see what had happened. This is what they saw. They saw the warrior standing at full height above a boy who was bent down in a crouch as if praying. In the warrior's right hand was a knife raised on high. The warrior's left hand was stiff at his side, one eye blazing, one eye covered. But all this lasted only an instant before Fire Thunder turned and strode out into the night. The boy was not praying. He was bleeding. The left side of his head glistened in the firelight. His cheek and neck were laced with a running blood. Blood ran down his arm onto the grass. When the people drew back his hair, they saw that his left ear had been cut off, cleanly and completely cut. But the boy continued crouched and quiet, staring at the ground. It was a frightening silence in one so young. Even as the adults knelt down beside him, he did not shift his eyes. He did not cry. He did not speak. The people said, "Who is this child?" "Moves walking," they said. "His name is Waskenmani." "Well, where is his mother? Why doesn't she come to help him? Where is his father?" "He doesn't have parents." "No parents? A Wablenica." "Ah, the poor child." Poor indeed. He must have done something very bad to cause such wrath in Fire Thunder. That is the end of the second chapter of, I'll hold it up again here, The Crying for a Vision by Walter Wangerin Jr. So I assume if you stuck with me through that, for this long, or whatever, that you enjoyed that to some extent. It's a very fascinating to me how it changes feel, and that creates a sense of drama that I think is one of Walter Wangerin Jr.'s real strengths as a storyteller. I mean, he has a number of them, but in all of his writing, he does such a great job of pushing towards one emotion and then suddenly flipping that emotion on its head. And that dramatic change creates a sense of heightening. Like the joy feels more joyful and the sadness feels more sad because we're getting the extremes next to each other. And when they're juxtaposed like that, they seem more intense. One thing that I think you can see in this story is how he captures people's personalities very clearly. I mean, I didn't read tons of stuff there, but we have at least 4 individuals who are pretty clearly drawn, right? We have the chief and the old woman, Waskin Mani's grandmother. Then we have Waskin Mani, and we have Fire Thunder. We also have the old man who's the crier. He becomes a more important character as the story goes on. We get introduced to him in one, like, part of a paragraph that even the little, as I said, the particularization, the detail that says this thing and none other that Wangerin does in this story is just, it's amazing. The second thing he does, I'm going to do 4 things. The second thing is that all of his characters are brilliantly motivated. And what I mean is that every character acts from his or her own motives, right? Every person has their own script. Waskin Mani isn't doing something because Walter Wangerin wants him to. I mean, ultimately, he is because he's a storyteller. But as you read the story, you feel the weight of each of these people wants something different, and they're acting to get it. Even the townspeople, they don't, who is this child? Oh no, that's terrible. And then their narrative, because Fire Thunder is such a hero. The boy must have done something really bad, right? It's pretty cool. So motivations are hard to do often as storytellers, because we often have a hard time keeping our own sense of what we want to happen out of the character's actions. And Walter Wangerin almost I can't think of an instance where I've been reading something that he's done and thought, this seems a little forced. Of course, it's kind of arrogant. I mean, he won the National Book Award, and he's been teaching literature for a long time. So the third thing, we have captures personality through particularization. He does motivations well. The third thing is the thematic contrasts. And you'll notice this if you read the book, and especially if you read it more than once. I think the thing I can say here without giving you kind of spoilers is the really interesting contrasts that are in Waskin Mani. You have innocence captured in a really brilliant way, and in Fire Thunder you have guilt captured in a brilliant way, but he never comes out and says, Waskin Mani represents innocence and Fire Thunder represents guilt. He never comes out and says that, but he communicates through their body language and through their actions that dynamic is going on, and he does it, I would say, in a sense so skillfully that we don't recognize that's the thing we're picking up on, in the story, but we attribute it to them unconsciously. And that is skillful storytelling, right? It affects us internally. It affects us on a level that we don't actually process consciously. Also, the thing that's kind of interesting in pairing Fire Thunder and Waskin Mani, you have the loss of an ear and the loss of an eye in this, right? Now if you weren't paying attention to that, I don't blame you. I didn't think about that till I went back and reread the story, or the first time I read it a long time ago, maybe I thought about it. I don't know, it's been so long, but the contrasts, as I said, not just the emotions of, like, you have joy and then you have sadness, are contrasted, but he does a really good job of juxtaposing lots of things, including thematic elements. And the last thing, of course, this may be the most obvious, but the voice of this story is just, to me, it's incredible. It's the thing that stands out the most about this is that somehow he's captured the flavor, not just by using words, though. It's not just that he uses words like Tatanka and Waskin Mani, which are kind of the easy way of capturing a culture. He does it through using his own voice, not to mimic a Lakota voice, but to say, how do I get in the heads of people and think of them as human beings, and sort of tell stories that feel like they could be told around a campfire, but in book form. It's just full of voice. So if you're curious how to write voice well, this would be a great book to study and go, why does this feel like it does? How did he pull this off? And reading a chapter 5 or 6 times and actually marking things and saying, I think it's right here. Now, what principle can I learn from that? That can be a great way to learn things about writing. Okay, I want to quickly just point out that we have this Good Books thing. We're doing another drawing, and it ends like in about a week, so there's still time for you to sign up for it. You can get the Good Books guide, which is this is a print version, but we're giving away the electronic version as usual, and we'll also have some an email sequence that has videos of worldviews in literature, and yeah, we'll put that in the comments. Next week, next Monday, my plan is to do another reading at 7 p.m. And I'm going to be reading from one that my students either seem to really like or be like, not that again. It's called A Gent from Bear Creek. It's the same book that I read from this past Christmas, if you were on Facebook and saw that one. I think I'm gonna read the first chapter from A Gent from Bear Creek. It's quite funny. It's a Western. It's written by Robert E. Howard, the guy who created Conan the Barbarian, but this is his humor. And I think A Gent from Bear Creek and all of his Breckenridge Elkins stories are by far his most artistic creations. So I'll be doing that next week, and hope you can join me. Hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for joining me, everybody. Have a good night.